Livewire's Mushihime-sama on Switch was a very sudden release that took many of us by complete surprise. To come out of nowhere could be a good or a bad thing, all things considered, but in this case, it was a great thing. And here we are again with another shooter that seemingly appeared out of nowhere, this time on Steam by Team Ladybug. Drainus may have a bit of a funny sounding name, but its gameplay is completely where it's at. In this episode of Bullet Heaven, we're gonna dive straight in to see what's up with Drainus. Drainus is a widescreen Yoko X-scrolling shoot-'em-up developed by Team Ladybug and Why So Serious Playground, and published by Why So Serious Playground and Playism on May 22nd, 2022 for Windows PC. As of this review, there are no other versions available. Team Ladybug is known primarily for developing Metroidvania titles, though interestingly there is one Toho spin-off among them. But it seems as if no one knew this game was coming. And we knew after taking just a brief look at the trailer that this was going to be one to check out. Let's take a closer look. The gameplay in Drainus is fast and furious, but also implements a thoughtful approach to power-ups, player health, and game progression. Typical hard 8-way control is what players will find here, and while the titular Drainus flies about the screen at a rate reasonable for most, it can be tweaked through 9 different speeds to suit the player's gameplay style. The right bumper on an Xbox-style controller also allows players to slow their craft, which once again can be dialed in through these same 9 levels, allowing players to set up a dash rather than focused movement if they choose. The Drainus is a pretty cool ship. Not only does it come ready equipped with a forward-firing blaster and a powerful beam super attack, the player can activate a handy shield that absorbs enemy attacks and fires them back as green homing lasers with varying degrees of intensity. The more fire is absorbed, the more powerful the counterattack will be. This technique is dependent on the guard gauge in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen and will autofill rapidly when it is not in use, allowing for it to be used frequently as needed. This bullet eater can be used to shield the player from any purple attack or hazard, but will also grant a brief handful of invincibility frames when successfully performed. Of course, if it runs dry while in use, the player will instantly be vulnerable to attack and will very likely sustain damage. This represents the core of Drainus' gameplay, but there's quite a bit more to it as players dig further into the game. Throughout their playtime, players will have the opportunity to build up their weapon systems with their choice of a number of cool implements of death, including bullet-based shots, mines and missiles, lasers, special bomber weapons, shields, option-style bits, and more. Of course, players will only start out with a basic shot and 3-way spread equipped on the outset of the game. As enemies are defeated, crystals will be released which will fill energy containers as they're collected. These energy containers can be used to purchase additional weaponry for use on the Drainus by way of the pause menu, which can be accessed at any time. This shop is also accessible before starting the next stage. In addition to the player's various weapon systems, a number of other enhancements can also be bought, including, but not limited to, extra weapon slots, shields, new weapon types, extra guard, extra special weapon power, and much more. A total of 5 weapon slots can be opened up and populated with various weapon systems, though more than one of the same kind doesn't work outside of the basic shot. Players enable these weapon systems by collecting power-up pickups, which lights up the next subsequent weapon slot at the top of the screen. However, these weapon slots count as the player's life as well, and while they can be refilled almost constantly in any given stage, the weapons associated with them will be disabled if the player is damaged to the point that the slot in question is shut off. If all of these slots are disabled and the player is hit again, they lose a life, lose all of their lives, and the player faces game over with the option to continue from their game save. But it goes even further. Not only do players have the ability to open up all kinds of extra mojo in their Drainus Bobanus, they can switch things in or out at any time too, allowing for the kind of unparalleled flexibility that makes any situation at all manageable. Flying through a wide open space that needs crowd control? Get your 5-way on and go to town. Cruising through narrow tunnels all of a sudden? Get a reflect laser in on the action. Going up against a hard boss? Swap out that super beam you were using against the big baddies and throw on an emergency repair system to maintain high firepower. There are all kinds of amazing combinations that players can come up with that tailors the game to exactly the specifications they desire, all with a manageable difficulty to get them used to the game to take on the harder difficulties down the line. Played over the course of 6 very lengthy stages, Drainus offers players quite a bit of game to chew through with its first loop alone, boasting a runtime of about an hour straight through. And while it's definitely not an especially difficult shooting game, it does have a great plot and works well as a survival-based shooting game. It also has an additional loop as well, and while this would undoubtedly take a long time to do on just a whim, that's 2 hours, homie. The player's progress is saved so that they can return at a later time to play more of the game, rather than having to slog through the whole thing all at once. And we have to say, the gameplay here is super duper solid with very responsive controls, giving players the ability to perform razor-sharp timing throughout their time with the game. Of course, its structure definitely smacks a bit of Euro shmup, which, depending who you ask, may or may not be a good thing. But we have to say, despite the shop and life system on top of regular lives and extends, this still feels like a Japanese shooter through and through thanks to its white-knuckle, intense, fast-paced gameplay, especially in Loop 2. It may not be as technical as a game from Cave or Rising, but it still has some serious chops in other respects. Beyond the hard difficulty, players that complete the main game story will also open up a pair of extra modes, the one-hit ridiculous mode and arcade mode, which spices things up with only one opportunity per stage to modify the Drainus outside of the phase between stages, and both are restricted to a time limit. So, you better know what you're going in for. The 2 loops are also played back-to-back with no story interrupting the action, though it's still largely a 2-hour affair. Its difficulty is also very manageable. We somehow got a first try 1-all, ending with 12 lives and 19 unused energy capsules. For those that are looking to perfect their runs, any save file allows players to access and play any cleared or current stage with the redo stage option in the pause menu. Previous stages don't count for score, but they can allow players to collect any missed records and upgrade their arsenal to be carried through to their current stage. Nice. This option is also very good for practice when training for a more flawless arcade run. The scoring system at play in Drainus is pretty simple. A basic multiplier that engages and grows over time will be added to the player's score. Nothing huge. Stage End is a little more involved. It boosts the player's score with a number of additional bonuses based on the player's performance. The number of energy tanks acquired, number and percentage of targets destroyed, crystals acquired, guard energy, super bomber attacks, hits taken, and crashes sustained are all factored into various score amounts. These points are then tallied and multiplied by the highest achieved multiplier in the stage in question. Getting a decent score quickly while avoiding hits that nullify the multiplier is key in grabbing extends as quickly as possible, thus presenting the player with a more likely 1cc on the loop that they're playing. All well and good, and while Drainus does not feature online leaderboards, this one is really more about the narrative rather than score chasing anyway. Especially with such basic scoring mechanics under the hood, it's not a terrible loss in this regard. If it were more involved, we might be a little more torn up about it. At the very least, the streamlined, well, we say streamlined, but you get what I'm saying. The streamlined arcade mode does have a rudimentary leaderboard that scrolls along the top of the title screen, and the player's initials and score display in the save slot assigned to the arcade session. It's not much, but it's something. There have been some serious standout shooters in 2022 with some amazing presentations, but pound for pound, Drainus might just have the best one yet. It all starts with the ultra-fluid animation on pretty much everything. It looks like a 2D game, but there's just no way this many 2D frames could have been put into this one. And it's especially evident later in the game that Drainus is absolutely a 3D game with some kind of shader that makes it look like a pixel art driven title. Or maybe it's just low resolution on the polygons. I don't really know, but it looks amazing. And let me tell you, it does the friggin' job. Soulcrest rather infamously attempted a similar trick with its largely 3D engine in Unity, but what we're seeing here is what Soulcrest wishes it could have been. And it's not just the ships either. There are some simply jaw-dropping moments and insane atmospherics throughout the whole game that kept me slack-jawed like nothing else has in a very long time, even in just Stage 1. And look at this friggin' incredible boss encounter. Never has a rectangular prism made me say, "That's so fucking cool," every single time I've seen it. Every single time! The soundtrack is also quite serviceable, and though it maybe isn't especially memorable, it's still excellent throughout. It definitely adds the right amount of tension to the experience, and we can get behind that. Weapon sounds, explosions, and more also add the right amount of flourish and thump to the game's audio. Though the VO clips for various indicators don't sound especially great, we have a hardish time understanding what they're saying actually. They still work and sound unique enough for us to know what they apply to. Hey, we all know that shmups are played for their plot, right? Okay, I'll stop being that sarcastic, but this time around we have to say Drainus actually has a decent one under the hood with some genuinely interesting characters and events. Like this little guy. The exposition really doesn't get in the way of the action, and there was enough of it that I wanted to see what happened next. Good stuff. The general UI is simple but effective, and the menus are somewhat generic in some spots, but overall, what's here works rather well indeed. The main difficulty selection screen is pretty great though. Regardless of where we weren't getting lost, that's for sure. So, how does Drainus stack up? Let's take a look. There's no doubt that the control in Drainus is superb. With a huge amount of remapping and speed customizability, players will have no trouble at all laying waste to their opposition. While higher difficulties will be where veterans want to be, normal and below is completely serviceable for novice and low intermediate players to get a 1-all with a bit of practice. Arcade mode was a fairly easy 1-all for us. Drainus' main stage set comes in at a chonky hour or so, with both loops dropping in at a hefty 2. With the extra modes, collectible record entries, and highly customizable weapon loadouts, and a great set of attainable achievements, there's a lot to do here and it's fun the whole time. This could easily be the best looking shmup of 2022. Subtle 3D and excellent environments provide all kinds of flash and sparkle the whole way through. It's so good! The sound and music in Drainus are great for their applied purpose, though the synthesized VO samples are kinda hard to make out. They sound unique enough to know what they stand for though. With a huge amount of flexibility with regards to speed, focused or enhanced movement, weapon systems, and the great reflect mechanic, Drainus does all kinds of things right. We don't even really have anything negative to say about it, save for its slightly too easy difficulty. Superb. Weighing in at about $15 US, Drainus' low cost with its tight gameplay, unlockable modes, and stellar presentation give it a great value, despite no online leaderboards. Drainus is probably the best surprise release we've seen so far on Bullet Heaven, and it's truly a wonder that no one knew this was coming. Not a peep, not a whisper. But its impact needs to be way bigger for what it is. I'm sure there will be some out there that will scoff at the quote-unquote Euro shmup aspects and somewhat easy difficulty, but play the game, get to know it, unlock the really hard stuff, and we're certain you'll understand why Drainus is an absolute must-play. You can get a copy of Drainus on Steam today for about $15 US. Friggin' rights, this is the kind of game that gets me stoked to do an episode. After a month of nothing but the Ray series, this is a welcome change of pace. Speaking of which, you may have noticed that Indy 3 is nowhere to be found. And I get it, but we're deep in the Ray series complete review right now, and we're still kinda waiting for a couple of PC Windows 95 releases to show up. Hopefully soon, because we have some neat findings on the layer section in Galactic Attack S Tribute. See you all in the next one.